From Wild West towns to volcanic islands, here are 10 creepy abandoned communities in the United States of America. Number 10. Bannack. Located in Beaverhead County, this abandoned gold rush town was named after the Bannock Indians. The discovery of valuable metals and jewels in 1862 made it a big deal at the time, though you needed to trek down the Montana Trail to reach it. The town was pretty out of the way. Its various buildings, such as a hotel, bakeries, and billiard halls, are made from logs, and some still exist today. Bannack became the capital of the Montana Territory before Virginia City inherited the mantle. 10,000 souls lived there. But like most communities during that time, things started to go downhill. Eventually, the place was quiet, and by the 1970s, everyone had packed up and gone elsewhere. There's some local intrigue in the story of Henry Plummer. A couple of years after the town was founded, Sheriff Plummer was hanged for apparently committing a series of crimes. Word was that he actually led a violent gang, though the actual evidence for this is a source of debate. Today, things are more pleasant, with the town rebranded as Bannock State Park. There are annual historic recreations where people can see what life was like back then. So for a limited time each year, Bannock sees life again. Number 9. Bodie. Like Bannock, Bodie is a state park and tourist attraction in California. In its heyday, it played host to thousands of people, drawn to the prospect of finding gold and striking it rich. Things took off in the late 19th century. The town got its name from an individual named Waterman S. Bodie. By 1877, the place was packed, following the collapse of a mine. Now, this sounds like a strange and tragic thing to mention, but the destruction was lucky in a sense. Why? Because it showed people just how much gold was deep inside the hills. With gold comes greed, and that's usually accompanied by bullets and freshly dug graves. Living in Bodie meant keeping one eye over your shoulder. It really was like something out of a hard-bitten Western flick. Death was a daily occurrence, though ultimately the town's boom period was short-lived. The place has a few ghosts knocking around, and even a curse on those who feel like taking a memento home from their trip. What happens in Bodie stays in Bodie. Have you ever visited a ghost town or abandoned town? What did you think of it? Was it scary? Were there any other people there? Did you have to trespass to get in? Let me know how it went in the comments below. Then remember to subscribe if you haven't already. There are always tons of great videos coming out right here, and you have to subscribe to make sure you don't miss them. Number 8. Bulloville. This town from Florida has a controversial and dramatic history. It began when well-to-do merchant Charles Bulow removed thousands of acres of forest in Flagler County, a move which would have enraged environmentalists today. Ripping out trees was less frowned upon in the 19th century, especially by the rich and powerful. Why was he doing it? Profit, of course. A more detailed and depressing answer is that he intended to set up a sugar plantation. Slavery was a brutal fact of life back then, full of dehumanizing abuses and suffering for its victims. Bulow also had a mill built on the site, with the business soon being taken over by Charles' son, John. He appears to have had a slightly better track record in that he was friendly with the local Seminole Indians. By no means does this make him a saint, but it's perhaps odd to see someone like him able to negotiate and befriend the beleaguered Native Americans. However, in 1836, not even 2 decades after it all started, the Seminole tribe burned the place to the ground. Why? It was all part of the Second Seminole Indian War. They thought John Bulow had sold them out, as the St. Augustine militia were deployed and waiting at the plantation. In fact, Bulow's property had been taken from him by the militia group, and he wasn't able to warn them. This misunderstanding led to the destruction of Bulowville. Today, the trees are growing back, though the remains are still there for visitors to take a look at if they dare. Number 7. Old Cahawba. Dallas County, Alabama is where you'll find the abandoned town of Old Cahawba. Its heyday was during the early 19th century, when thousands of people called the place home. It served as the state capital for a few years, but then something happened that changed the town's fortunes forever. A little conflict called the American Civil War. Confederate forces decided to take the local railroad for their own use. What did they turn the city into? A prison where Union soldiers were locked up. This does not sound like a pleasant place to have been a resident by the sounds of it. Things dried up, and within a century, Old Cahawba was a ghost town. As with various abandoned locations, Old Cahawba has been turned into a park and tourist attraction. There are Native American ruins there dating back thousands of years, though these are hidden today. Some of the buildings still stand, like a schoolhouse and churches. The slave quarters that used to be part of the Kirkpatrick Mansion structure can be viewed, which is odd because, in an ironic twist, the newly freed slaves made the town their own for a period after the war. Number 6. Centralia. The coal mining business was what literally fueled the town of Centralia in Columbia County, Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, Mother Nature had plans for this part of the world, with an unusual and volatile situation leading to the place becoming largely deserted. So what happened? In the early 1960s, a fire broke out underground. Believed to have been triggered by burning waste, though the jury is still out, the flames reached the coal seam from an old mine and started an almighty blaze below. There was another reported fire from 1932, and some have theorized it could have even been connected to that. Such is the length of time this phenomenon can last. The underground fire spread through an extensive network of abandoned mines, posing a threat to the townsfolk. At one point, a steam-spewing sinkhole opened up and nearly claimed the life of a young boy. Not everyone gave up their homes, but the vast majority chose to leave, and they don't have plans to return anytime soon. Experts reckon the fire will still be burning in a couple of hundred years. Insane, right? Number 5. Doomtown. This alarmingly named community was built in the Yucca Flat Basin out in the Nevada desert. You won't find signs of life there today. Actually, there were never any signs of life in the first place. Because while Doomtown had a population, it consisted of shop window dummies. Living in prop houses, they were there for one reason and one reason only: to try and withstand a nuclear blast. The Federal Civil Defense Administration wanted to see what an atomic bomb would do to an all-American town. Nevada was where they conducted many of these tests, with the mushroom clouds something of a spectacle to gamblers in nearby Las Vegas. The test was carried out on Doomtown in 1955. Movie audiences may recall a scene in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where the protagonist found himself stuck in the dummy town and had to hide in a fridge to escape the blast. That sounds like the ultimate case of, don't try this at home. Number 4. Grossingers Catskill Resort. Remember the eerie Overlook Hotel from The Shining? There were definite similarities between that and Grossingers Catskill Resort Hotel in Sullivan County, New York. This place was bustling with holidaymakers in the 1950s, where it was part of the Borscht Belt. The impressive 1,200-acre resort was built up by Asher Selig Grossinger and his family. The whole idea of artificial skiing took off here. Grossinger brought in fake snow in 1952 so guests could slide around to their heart's content. Within decades, it was on offer everywhere. The resort was really somewhere to be seen back then. However, by 1986, the doors were closed permanently. From there, it became dilapidated. Former glories like the grand pool area and hotel ballroom were abandoned and covered in plant life. We're sure the place still had visitors, but more of the teenagers causing mischief rather than wealthy tourist kind. That said, the golf course was still in use as recently as 2017. Wrecking crews moved in the following year, and it was truly the end of an era. But for a long while, Grossinger's dream lived on, even if it wound up uninhabited for many years. Number 3. Helltown. We've seen Doomtown. Now, welcome to Helltown. The name came from the Native American Lenape people, who moved there in the 1770s. To be more precise, they arrived after being ordered to relocate from their home states by white settlers. Originally calling it Cleartown, they decided to rename it Helltown, as clear in German is hell. Around a decade later, the Lenape moved on when fighting broke out with the white settlers again. The name Helltown lives on as part of the former community of Boston Township. They were calling it home until the 1970s, when the government decided they wanted the area as a national park. People were paid off and packed up their troubles. However, it was all for nothing. The park never happened, so the people of the town were displaced unnecessarily. Parallels between those in Boston Township and Native Americans who were kicked out of their territory have been drawn. Though, of course, the tribe's people had a significantly more depressing and harsh time when they were evicted. To cap things off, Helltown lives up to its name by being the site of numerous ghost stories and tales of terror. The devil himself may have even appeared here, with reports claiming that satanic worship takes place. It doesn't sound like a place for tourists by any means. Number 2. Kalapana. Abandoned communities and ghost towns are usually associated with the dry and dusty climes of the Old West. But check this out for something a bit different. This town is found on the legendary and beautiful Big Island. Hawaii is gorgeous, but can also sometimes be hazardous, as the inhabitants of Kalapana discovered in 1983. As far as reasons for abandoning a community go, being in the shadow of an active volcano is a pretty impressive one. The mighty Kilauea erupted, and it was clear Kalapana would start falling prey to the island's ancient volcanic activity. It was covered in lava, meaning today's town is stuck in a tough coating of black rock. The craziness of this place is evident in the sight of a single "road closed" sign sticking up out of the hardened molten goop. Never was a message so understated. Number 1. Rhyolite. There's boom and there's bust. Rhyolite, a famous ghost town in Nevada, experienced both. The time between the two? An astonishingly brief 4 years. What made Rhyolite so extraordinary? The sheer scale of it, the speed at which it shot up, and the circumstances under which it all came crashing down. In 1904, gold and quartz were prospected in the area. Why did it wind up being called Rhyolite? That's the name of a local volcanic rock. And appropriately enough, the results were explosive. Over a 30-mile stretch, no fewer than 2,000 claims were staked. The town became so grand it even had an opera house, as well as an ice cream parlor, and eventually not just one, but 2 electric plants. By 1907, however, the climate had gone from hotter than rhyolite to colder than ice cream itself. A national panic, referred to as the Knickerbocker Crisis, led to people losing their nerve. All of a sudden, digging up gold and quartz didn't seem like such an exciting occupation anymore. The town was abandoned, and you'd never know it was once the site of a dramatic rush for riches. But you can see the leftovers, which exist in the shape of a train depot and other bits and pieces. But on the whole, it was all over before it even got started. Thanks for watching. Are there any other cool and creepy abandoned communities you feel we left off the list? Let us know in the comments and be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you soon.